Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of October of 2025. Today we have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. Telling the truth, during the previous 24 hours, we received a lot of strange and weird updates, at least from the Ukrainian side. So let's discuss them in details, and first let's talk about another massive missile and drone attack that took place during the previous night. The Russians carry out another attack on Ukrainian energy facilities and critical infrastructure. And this morning, the pro-Ukraine resources published this photo where we can see the approximate routes of Russian attacks. And as you can see, the Russians were attacking mainly just the eastern part of Ukraine, the territory around the cities of Poltava and Kharkiv. So lots of explosions, lots of drones were recorded and so on. And later, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine published this article where we can see the approximate number of drones and the missiles that were used by Russia. So according to this article, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, more precisely, Russians used just 357 air vehicles. Drones and missiles altogether. So this is not a record number, obviously, but this is not always the lowest number of drones and missiles. At the same time, the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to bring down 283 out of 320 drones of various types. So this is probably the normal number. Almost every single day we can see almost the same numbers provided by Ukrainian side. The most interesting number is that the Russians during this attack used 28 Iskander missiles. So 26 Iskander M ballistic missiles and 2 Iskander K cruise missiles. So 28 missiles. And the Ukrainians are saying that during this attack they haven't managed to bring down even a single Iskander missile. And this is probably the first weird and strange update that was provided by the Ukrainian side. So today, officially, the Ukrainians reported that they don't have air defense, or their air defense is not capable to bring down Russian missiles. So, and this is the first strange thing that we got during the previous 24 hours, because this is for the first time, for example, since the beginning of the special military operation, when the Russians used so many Iskander missiles at the same time, and this is the first time when the Ukrainians haven't managed to bring down even a single one. So obviously there are two options. The first one, indeed, the Ukrainians are no longer have any air defense system in Ukraine, and the Russians currently see no barriers in front of them. They can attack any object across Ukraine with Iskander missiles, and they will destroy it. This is the first option. And the second option is that Ukrainians are not telling us the truth. So I would like to remind you that tomorrow we're going to see probably one of the most important meetings of the 2025, the meeting between the President of the United States of America and the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. And they're going to talk a lot, obviously, and they're going to talk about missiles. Most likely tomorrow Trump will announce that he will give Zelensky Tomahawk missiles, maybe 20, maybe 50 units, missiles, and then Ukrainians most likely will be able to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. So what is the connection between complete absence of Ukraine air defense, according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine report, and tomorrow's meeting? I would like to remind you that since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians have attacked Ukrainian energy facilities probably dozens of times, right? And the thing is that sometimes in 2022, when the Russians just began bombing Ukraine energy facilities, sometimes Ukrainians reported that the Russians managed to deal much higher damage to their facilities than the Russians did. So for some reason, the Ukrainians were showing, let's say, that the Russians made, good results when talking about Russian side. But Ukrainians in 2022 did that just on purpose. They were trying to probably to show the Russians that their missiles are very effective and that the Russians managed to destroy energy facilities, let's say, to force them to slow down their pressure. Furthermore, the Ukrainians, by those numbers in 2022, were trying to show the Western countries that they need more money, that they needed more weapons and arms and air defense systems. So probably, and maybe today we can see the same story. The Ukrainians maybe didn't bring down even a single missile of Iskander type because tomorrow during the meeting between Trump and Zelensky, Zelensky will have another card how to convince Trump to give him more weapons, especially more air defense systems. So maybe this is the reason, maybe this is the situation. So that is why I believe that it's too early to make any conclusions regarding Russian attack, because I think that the real results and the real work of Ukraine air defense we will see just on Saturday, on Sunday, or on Monday. So a few days after Zelensky-Trump meeting happens, and few days after Trump announces about additional military package to Ukraine, then we're gonna see the real picture. And if in 2, 3, or 5 days the Russians will repeat their massive missile and drone attack, and they will damage and they will be able to break through Ukraine air defense system as they did today, then of course we can agree that indeed something is happening with Ukraine. They don't have any more air defense, and we see that the Western countries are not able to replace air defense system that was destroyed. So for now, let's wait and see. And telling the truth, this situation with missiles and drones is not the only worried report that we got during the previous 24 hours from Ukrainian side. Anyway, let's return back. Let's return to these missiles. Once again, the Russians attacked the eastern part of Ukraine, and as you can see, we have lots of icons exactly from the eastern part of Ukraine. Today, lots of work have been done regarding the situation. There are lots of articles on the map. You can read them. Lots of fire anomalies. There is detailed information what exactly the Russians attacked. When summarize everything, the Russians attacked the gas transportation system, and most likely the Russians managed to damage this gas transportation system significantly. We have lots of explosions, lots of smoke screens recorded, so the situation is very bad for the armored force of Ukraine. As for now, it's very difficult to understand. Maybe the Russians are planning to use these pipelines for another pipeline across Ukraine operation. Very difficult to say, but one thing is clear, that this winter most likely is going to be very difficult for the Ukrainian population. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Kherson direction. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that several resources reported that the Russians crossed the river of Dnipro, but as for the beginning of the 16th of October of 2025, nothing of this was confirmed, so that is why we believe that those reports were just speculation. At the same time, we got very interesting update from the city of Nikolaev. Today, pro-Ukrainian resources reported that a Russian guided aerial bomb hit a target in Mykolaiv for the first time. The explosion site is approximately 60 kilometers from the front line. Ukrainian sources claim that the launch was conducted from 150 kilometers away. So the Ukrainians are trying to tell us that the Russians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, attacked the city of Nikolaev with aviation bomb, basically with FAB 250 most likely. So as you can see, according to this article, the target was approximately 60 kilometers from front line, so this is the distance. We see that more or less reliable information, and the Ukrainians are saying that the Russians launched this bomb from 150 kilometers distance. So we believe that somewhere from here the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine. So, and this is a very big distance, as you can see, and as we can see, the city of Nikolaev has become the second city in the special military operation. We're talking about big cities that was attacked by FAB, by aviation bomb. The first one was the city of Zaporozhye. The Russians have bombed probably dozens of times the city since the beginning of this year, but this city is located much closer to the line of combat contact than the city of Nikolaev, and now it seems that the Russians are going to use these tactics. They're going to build more Su-35 and Su-34 airplanes, and they're planning to bomb the entire line between Russian Federation and the deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. So 60 kilometers, this is a very big number for FABs, and this is a very big number for Ukrainians. They don't have air defense system against missiles and drones, and now they have another headache by the name of FAB bombs that will attack Ukraine positions along the line of combat contact. Now let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, small changes were recorded. Today, pro-Ukraine resources published this video from the eastern bank of the river of Yanchul, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with bombs with FPV drones. Based on this video, we came to conclusion that this small part of the settlement of Охотничне was captured by Russia. And based on this report and based on this video, as you can see, we have adjusted the map. So currently, we have no doubts that the Russians Russians control completely the eastern bank of the river of Yanchul, and now the Russians are just trying to find a way how to cross the river and how to capture the entire Poltavka fortified territory. In the northern direction, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the direction of the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka. This information today was clarified and provided us by different neutral mappers. Just to remind you, yesterday the Russians secured the village of Alexeyevka, and today we had additional report that the Russians managed to improve their positions and they managed to shorten the distance to the settlement of Aristopol for less than 3 kilometers. So the Russians are about to begin offensive operation in this area, and we believe that the Russians may try this because this settlement, the settlement of Aristopol, is located on the Russian side of the river of Volcha, which gives the Russians perfect position for offensive. I would like to remind you that the Russians captured every single settlement on the Russian bank of the river of Yanchul, so the Russians can do the same in this area as well, and then to continue offensive operation further in the direction of Velika Mikhailovka. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Novopavlovka. The situation for Ukrainians is getting very difficult. I would like to remind you that during the previous months, during September and August, several resources reported that the Russians began offensive operation in the area of the settlement of Ivanovka. The Russians crossed the river of Volcha in this part and began offensive in the central part, in the direction of the central part of the settlement from the southeastern side. And as a result of clashes during the previous 2 months, the Russians managed to capture up to 40% when talking about geolocations and different updates according to different resources. But maybe the Russians have already established complete control over the settlement, but yet nobody has confirmed this, so the situation is completely unknown. Anyway, the Russians began offensive operation in the direction of Novopavlovka from the south. Today we had this video published by Ukrainian resources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the fields to the south of the settlement, and this video confirms that the distance between positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and the village itself is already less than 4 kilometers, more precisely 3 kilometers and 560 meters, which is already nothing. So the Russians are tightening the news around the settlement of Novopavlovka. The Russians are advancing in this direction from the northeast, from the southwest, and from the south. So it's very difficult to predict when exactly the battle is going to start, but obviously in 2025 we might see the battle for this village. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, and this is the second area where we got a very weird and very interesting update from Ukrainian resources. Today, the pro-Ukrainian mappers adjusted their maps in the Ukrainian favor, and today, the pro-Ukrainian resources reported that the Russians were forced to fall back from the area of the settlement of Kucherev Yar and from the area of the settlement of Shakhova. So Ukrainians counter-attacked from the settlement of Dobropolye in the eastern direction, and as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians managed to restore complete control over these territories. So this is very interesting, and why this report is weird, the thing is that at the same time, we haven't received anything from pro-Russian resources regarding this attack. It seems that the Russians either are trying to avoid this attack, trying to probably hide the consequences of this Ukrainian counteroffensive, or the Russians are trying to tell us that there were no attack from the Ukrainian side. But what is the reason for Ukrainians to do so? Once again, the answer we have already discussed. Tomorrow we are going to see the most important meeting of 2025, the meeting between the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the President of States, Trump, where most likely Trump will announce additional package to Ukraine, and he will give them Tomahawk missiles. So that is why for Ukraine it is very important to show that they are still able to attack, they are still able to go in offensives, because as we discussed in the previous videos, the Ukrainians will attack on the ground, they will reduce the mobilization, they will lower the mobilization age until 23, then 22 and 21. They will mobilize hundreds of soldiers, thousands probably, and most likely Ukrainians will try to carry out another offensive operation under protection and with the support of X-16s, of Storm Shadow missiles, most likely if states provides Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Most likely Germany will provide Taurus missiles. So this is going to be a very modern NATO army, well-trained, experienced, and with modern NATO weapons. So why not to try another shot? So that is why everything is possible. So this counter-offensive operation that hasn't been confirmed by anybody could be just a media attack without any purpose, without even clashes on the ground. It's just adjustment on the map without any proof. So everything is possible. And furthermore, tomorrow is the meeting, so Zelensky wants to have strong cards before this meeting. Because another important thing that today the Russians were attacking the Ukrainians in this region. But the Russians were attacking not from that position, the Russians were attacking from the southern area, from the mainland, let's call it like this. And here we can see the video that was published by Ukrainian resources. And here we can see how Russians using 30 vehicles, armored vehicles of different types, including tanks, infantry fighting carriers, and many other different types of weapon, how Russians were moving in the direction of the settlement of Shakhova. Just would like to point your attention to this scene. As you can see, dozens of vehicles were moving in the direction of Ukraine positions in the Shakhova pocket. And here we can see how Ukrainians were trying to repel this attack. Ukrainians reported that they managed to repel this attack and to destroy Russian units and forces and to force them to fall back. But during this video, we haven't seen anything that can confirm this. Yes, the Russians were moving, the Ukrainians were attacking, probably some vehicles were damaged and destroyed, but not every single vehicle was damaged. And so this is another thing why I'm telling you that Ukraine reports about counterattack is very interesting. So Ukrainians counterattacked when the Russians launched their massive attack from the south. So it doesn't work like this. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, because, and I'll repeat to you my idea that everything is going to become clear somewhere by Monday, when we're going to understand what exactly states are going to provide, when they're going to do this, and what is the real status on the ground, and what is the real status with a Ukrainian energy system. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Syria's Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, nothing special happened in this area. There was just one video published by Russian resources, and here we can see how Russians were destroying a bridge and pontoon, the pontoon bridge between the settlements of Liman and Slavyansk. As a result of this attack, as you can see, the pontoon bridge was completely destroyed. Now it will take some time for Ukrainians to restore it. So it's just the only video from this direction, and probably today was the first day when we haven't received anything regarding changes on the ground. So the Russians, of course, are attacking, but as you can see, without changes. As for the northern directions, during the previous 24 hours, the same story. Just several videos were published by pro-Russian resources, how they were hunting and destroying positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of the Kupiansk pocket. Today, several Ukrainian politicals stated that the city of Kupiansk has already collapsed without any chances to restore control over the territory. Later, some pro-Ukraine resources reported that those updates were just fake. So lots of updates, but without different changes on the ground. As for the city of Volchansk, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to finish the battle almost completely for the western part of the city. The Russians maintained the line along the river of Volcha and the settlement of Bugrovatka, so everything tells us that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of Volchansk. At least they're about to cut the road T2104, and if the Russians if the Russians are able to cut this road, then most likely everything further in the northeastern direction, we are talking about this pocket, would collapse, because Ukrainians will not be able to support a normal supply of their contingent there. The road through the city of Volchansk was the only good road for these purposes, and this can lead to significant changes in the Russian favor without almost any resistance from the Ukrainian side. As for the Sumy direction, during the previous 24 hours, we continue receiving updates that Ukrainians continue their counterattacks in this region, and as a result of counterattack, the Ukrainians managed to recapture up to 50% of the settlement of Alexeyevka, and the Ukrainians continue their counteroffensive. We believe that in coming days, the Russians would be forced to fall back in the direction of the settlements of Novo-Nikolaevka and Vladimirovka towards more reliable positions, and then Ukrainians will regroup and probably continue further. And that's it for today. Military vs. Samurai channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.